All right, well, thank you guys all for coming out here. I don't know what to do with this table here. Do I sit on it? Do I jump it? I'm just going to slide it out the way. Man, it's so great to see so many faces from all across Canada here today. I was, I was worried that we weren't going to get anyone. In fact, one of the things that has kept me, I guess, going for so long in this party as leader, I should have probably stepped down a while ago because I've just kind of burnt myself out and run out of steam. Need to focus on my career and family for a bit and recover. But one of the things that has, maybe this is like my arrogant hubris here, but I'm worried that there's no one that can keep the party going, that can, fill in for Corrine and I. And so it's a huge weight off my back, number one, to see for the first time in I think party history, to see this many candidates run for leadership, for one thing. And they're all quality guys, and we'd be lucky to have any one of them leading this party. But then to see you guys spend all this time and money and take time off to come to Western Canada, it just fills me with all sorts of hope. It makes me think that, okay, maybe the last 7 years wasn't for nothing. A lot of people have asked me why I'm stepping down, and the ultimate reason is, look, the last 7 years has been an amazing roller coaster ride. It's been ups and downs and just a thrill ride beyond imagination, but I'm nauseated. I need some time to recover. I just, I'm burnt out a little bit. And frankly, this party deserves someone that can put more time and effort into leading it. Malcolm has said that Corrine has been, it has basically single-handedly carried this party on its back, and there's a lot of truth to that. I get to smile pretty for the cameras and say some things and do some podcast interviews and get the message out a little bit. That's easy. What Corrine does, we literally pay her. Her salary is, her compensation package is shit and abuse. That's what she gets paid in, and she gets no recognition for it. And so I'm super grateful to have had Corrine as our president for the past 2 years. She's kept this party alive. It was on the verge of collapse. With the rise of the PPC and the populist movement and people throwing in with the latest kind of fad movement, we had trouble getting our party registered. And it was thanks in large part to Corrine's efforts that we managed to keep this party alive. It's been around for over 45 years now, and it'll be around another 45 years, thankfully, to people like Corrine. So thank you, Corrine. I can't say that enough. And also thank you, Malcolm, for all the stuff you had to do getting this organized. It's great to see the turnout. It's great that we have such a great facility. And I know you're going through, personal health issues, and it can't be easy for you. So thank you very much, Malcolm, for all the work you put in here. All right, now they tell me today I kind of want to talk about. I've been trying to rack my brain. Like, this is probably the last speech I'm going to give this party. Well, it is the last speech I'm going to give this party leader, which, I wanted to go out on a bang, but I couldn't think of anything. I come up with one idea, and it's like, that's stupid, or come up with another idea, that's stupid. So I'm not going to put all that pressure on myself. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the lessons I've learned that maybe I can pass on to our next leader and our next candidates and our next crop of people that are going to carry this party forward. But one of the things I've learned is that you're supposed to start off speeches with a joke. So I'm going to do my best here with a couple jokes. This is a joke that Walter Block told a room full of antitrust lawyers, all right? The first joke, and antitrust lawyers, for those that don't know, are people that are concerned themselves with corporate monopolies and breaking them up and that sort of thing. First joke is that there are 3 prisoners in the Gulag in the former Soviet Union. The 3 find out why each of them is there. The first said that he came late to work and was accused of cheating the state out of labor. The second guy said that he came early and was accused of trying to outcompete his comrades. The third guy said he came to work every day and exactly on time, and the KGB accused him of owning a Western wristwatch. The second joke is that there are 3 prisoners in the US. They were all in jail for economic crimes of violating monopoly laws. First guy said that he charged higher prices than anyone else, and the government then accused him of price gouging and profiteering. The second guy charged lower prices than anyone else, and they accused him of predatory and cutthroat pricing. The third guy said that he charged the same price as everyone else, and they accused him of collusion and price fixing. So it's kind of a libertarian dad joke, I guess. You have to be a giant nerd. That's why I'm not a comedian.
I laugh.
You laughed? Okay, thanks, Malcolm. Thanks for that laugh. All right, so I thought just to set the context of what I learned running for party, I think it's important that you know a little bit about my history. I think a lot of you do, but you know, I never had any ambition or desire to be a political figure, to be a politician. In fact, I was almost drugged kicking and screaming into this party back in towards the end of 2013, early 2014. And you know, I came to the attention of some libertarians when I did some film work with, you know, working as a firefighter in Fort McMurray. Every firefighter has a side hustle. My side hustle was film production. And I was pissed off at all these environmentalists that would come to Fort McMurray and slag our community and slag our industry. And I got sick of it. And what I decided to do was something constructive. I said, I volunteered my services as a video production guy on all these Hollywood elites that came to town. And so I ended up working with Neil Young and Daryl Hannah on a project they were doing, and I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great for Neil to point his cameras at all the environmental solutions that Fort McMurray was generating? Wouldn't it be great to have Neil Young point his cameras at the fact that you know, Fort McMurray is the most charitable community per capita in Canada because of this dirty tar sands and the excess wealth and capitalism that's occurring here. Look at all this flourishing. Look how we're looking after people. Look how we're looking after the environment because of the consciousness that are, you know, there's a reason why third world countries don't care about the environment. It's because they're just trying to survive. And so we need to unleash capitalism if we care about the environment. There was a solar power stage at this carnival called Sustainable that was in town when Neil Young was there. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to have Neil Young sing a song in Fort McMurray in the heart of dirty oil country on a stage powered by sunlight. And of course Neil didn't want to have any part of that. He didn't want to see anything good about the community or about the oil industry. What he wanted to do was shoot oil sands porn, all that ugly, nasty stuff that would get his constituents off, let's say. And so he's burned a lot of fossil fuel with coming up in his entourage with his bus and his flights, and they decided to produce a film explaining why what he was doing was bad. Which was fine. I always told these guys, I'm willing to shoot whatever you want at the end. I was just trying to throw a little cognitive dissonance their way. But what really pissed me off was Neil Young then went to Washington, D.C. the next week and said that we looked like Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the bombs, and that we were committing genocide on the First Nations people. And if you know anything about that area, you know, our First Nations community, while any First Nations community are not great places to live because of all the government corruption and basically communism that is imposed on them, and you know, the property rights that are stripped away from them. But of indigenous communities, Fort McMurray's communities are far and away heads and shoulders above other ones. They get billions of dollars a year in contracts, and you know, they do quite well. And you know, so I took exception to what Neil was saying, and I wrote an article explaining Neil's hypocrisy. I mean, here was a guy who had a 36-year-old son with cystic fibrosis. And if you know anything about cystic fibrosis, it's a disease where your lungs fill up with fluid and you require kind of round-the-clock care. The life expectancy is maybe early 20s, and his son was 36. Now, why was his son 36? You could draw a line in a link of chains back to the dirty smokestacks of the Industrial Revolution that led to his son being able to flourish and survive and travel around the world with his dad, engaging in fun film projects. Now, at no other time in history would Neil have been able to make that much excess wealth by making noises with his mouth and with his stringed instrument. And here we are, because of all this international division of labor, capitalism, trade, you know, it created all this flourishing. So to me, he was undermining the very thing that was keeping his son alive, and that just was unforgivable. And so I wrote this article, and some libertarians noted the libertarian themes in it, and went to my blog, and of course I had all sorts of libertarian articles, and the last one I had written on that blog was explaining why political action and voting is probably immoral and you shouldn't do it because you're just encouraging the bastards. And, and so they called me up and said, hey, would you be willing to run as a candidate for the Libertarian Party in 2015? This was towards the end of 2013. I said, no, I'll refer you to this blog I wrote. You guys are probably evil, just so you know. And, you know, they kept after me. They were very patient, and they weren't defensive, and they kept bringing up one name over and over again, and that name was Ron Paul. And they're like, Tim, you can't deny that Ron Paul made a big difference. I mean, you say that you're all about educating people and changing their minds and making more libertarians. Well, who made more libertarians in the last 2 decades than Ron Paul? And I couldn't argue with that. He used the political stage to get a message out. And so there you go. I said, okay, in 2015, I'm gonna run for Parliament. I got a year and a half to figure this stuff out. Well, 2 days after I made my commitment, of course, the universe has some kind of sense of humor. My member of Parliament resigned, and I was thrown into a by-election. Having no idea what to do, I assembled a team a ragtag team of libertarians from across the country. One guy flew out from Ontario. He was a professional poker player, and he became my campaign manager. He said, I hear the tables are pretty hot in Fort Mac. I'll come there and take a bunch of money off those oil guys. And so he came there and ran my campaign during the day and took money off oilmen at night at the poker tables. And we had no idea what we were doing. We threw a bunch of memes against the wall. And the one obviously that stuck was, I want gay married couples to protect their marijuana plants with guns. And yeah, and I love to say I take credit for that. I just took a slogan I saw on the internet and put it on my face, and that one went around the world and popularized the saying. But I think Austin Peterson originally came up with it. So remember that, internet. I'm giving Austin Peterson credit for this. You know, so many times I get accused, or Austin gets accused of stealing that slogan from me or whatever. It's all libertarian infighting nonsense. Anyways, that one went around the world. It got me on Fox News, CNN. This Hour Has 22 Minutes made fun of me, made me a national laughingstock, which was awesome. Got me all sorts of publicity, and it just so happened that we were having one of these conventions 2 months after I hit the spotlight, and someone nominated me for leader, and next thing you know, I'm leading a political party. So very quickly I went from writing an article explaining why you should never vote to asking people to vote for me for prime minister. And so that's a little bit of my history, and it'll become clear why I tell that story and why it's important. But first, I just want to talk a little bit about the task in front of us, because it's a Sisyphean task. I mean, this is no small undertaking we're engaged in here. You know, today I was reading that our federal debt increases by, I think, $930 million a day. That's almost $1 billion a day. Now, what does that translate to taxpayers? There's not all Canadians are taxpayers. There's 18.4 million taxpayers. So, you know, and a lot of those taxpayers are probably net tax recipients. In other words, they get a lot of benefits from the state more than they put into it. So it's a very small number of people. It's less than half of Canadians that are carrying the weight of this. And for us, people that pay taxes, that amounts to $51 a day or $1,500 a month that we now owe every month, every day, because of what the federal government's doing. I mean, look, the pandemic, I could go on and on about, and I'm sure I have, and you guys have. I'm not going to go through all the things, but I mean, look, we had people literally forbidden, old people. One old lady she was forbidden by the state to interact with people. She was isolated, and her health started declining because social interaction was important for her. And when they opened it up again, her health improved. And then with the threat of another lockdown and isolation looming, and her family not being able to see her, being prohibited by the state to see her, she opted for assisted suicide, which the state generously granted her, of course. The state went in and said, okay, we'll kill you, and your family's now allowed in because we're killing you. They're allowed to watch you die. They're not allowed to watch you live because they might kill you, but because we're killing you. I mean, that story to me epitomizes the mentality and the utter inhumanity that we're seeing right now, where we are destroying lives, we're killing people, some of them fast by lethal injections, other ones slow by robbing them of their dignity, their pride, their job, their means of income, making them wards and dependents of the state. It's a slow suicide that is happening right now. And that will only increase. I mean, we just saw all sorts of noises coming from the UN over the past week about how the climate catastrophe is upon us. You know, we knew this was coming. We knew that after COVID, they were going to start pushing the climate agenda. There was documents that clearly stated this. I think it was at CNN or something like that. They said, okay, after the pandemic, we're going to start pushing the climate agenda. So it's no accident that this UN report comes out catastrophizing climate change and that we have to do something about it. And so it's obvious to see, anyone can predict where this is going. I mean, when you have world leaders talking about the new normal and the Green New Deal, resetting the whole world under a world economy, obviously it's important to see where this is going. And so we have all these interconnected, intertwined webs of state intervention, of initiatory force, of violence against and threats of violence against people. If you open up your business, enforcers are going to come. If you defend yourself, they're going to put you down. I mean, that's what libertarians know is the state is. It's a organization that monopolizes violence and has a mandate to use violence. That's the only difference between the state and any other corporation, is that it has this mandate and this air of authority around it when it comes to violence. And I just wanted to point out, you know, some people say, okay, well, look, libertarians, what you should do is you should focus on winning local elections, right? Because you can do a lot. You actually have a chance of winning a town council seat or being a mayor of a small town. And yeah, I mean, there's some legitimacy to that. But what are you going to do as mayor of a small town, okay? Let me just give you an example. We're in Edmonton, and just next door is Sherwood Park, where I live and work, okay? And I work there as a firefighter paramedic, so I work in the healthcare industry. Half the time I'm on the fire truck and my boss is the county, the other half I'm on the ambulance and I answer to Alberta Health Services, the political or provincial Politburo that controls healthcare in Alberta. Now, I spent a year as a project manager with the county because we thought it would be a good idea for our paramedics that we pay for to provide in-place community paramedicine to our residents. This was before the pandemic even. It really would have been great during the pandemic to have this, where residents were afraid to leave their house, be able to provide care right in their home. Community paramedic goes into a home, does an assessment, talks to the family doctor, comes up with a care plan, does diagnostic tests, and provides medication and works on a treatment plan with the person. So it's really concierge bedside service. And I spent a year trying to work on this for the county, and of course I ran into roadblocks of the province. AHS didn't want to approve it, and so it was dead. And so now, as a paramedic going through the pandemic and seeing all these seniors suffering at home because they're too afraid to come to the hospital. The hospitals, you know, they don't want to catch the deadly virus, and they have all these legitimate health concerns. Wouldn't it have been great as a healthcare provider if I could go out and provide care for these people, consenting adults, and there would have been a huge market for it. Even charitably do it. Okay, I can't do that. So how can my local politician help me do that? What can he do about it? Can he say, okay, go ahead and do it? No. He has to work on it with the province. What about a provincial politician? Can he allow me to do this? Well, there's Alberta Health, there's provincial health legislation that is harmonized with the federal Canada Health Act, okay? And so in order to get billions of dollars from the federal government, the province needs to basically ban private healthcare. It has to ban healthcare providers from working for anyone but the government. So provincial politicians can't do anything about it. And of course, the federal politicians can't do anything about it because the citizens want public health care. Universal health care is like a Canadian value. You don't question it. And so all these things are intertwined. So what's a local politician going to do, even if you get elected, about this need in the community for in-home health care? And this is why I mean all these things are linked together, all undergirded by this idea of statism, that we can initiate force if it's for the greater good. And most people believe this, and that is inherently the problem. And then of course, we don't just have the national politicians, we have what some people refer to as the globalists, the WHO putting out health recommendations. So it's no coincidence that all the guidelines that I, as a paramedic, am now doing at the local level are harmonized with actually the WHO, because the national policies harmonize with the WHO, and then the provincial policies harmonize with the national policies and the local. So it's all intertwined and it's all interconnected. And this is, like I said, it is a huge task. It's overwhelming. You don't know where to start. One person might say, well, you need to identify the evil people, the globalists, the lizard people, and you need to just get rid of them. You need to drain the swamp. Well, okay, but someone else will fill those roles because there's a political demand for it. Culture demands it. So the first lesson I'm going to talk about today is clarifying our purpose as the Libertarian Party. What is our purpose? What is it that we are after? And I think we all agree that we want to limit government, we want to shrink it down, we want to restrain it. And how do we do that? Because there's all sorts of ways we can do that. And David Nolan, one of the founders of the Libertarian Party in the U.S., and in some ways our founder too, because we took our cues from the Libertarian Party in the U.S. starting, and a year later, I think it was, or 2 years later, we started the Canadian Libertarian Party for the same purpose. And David Nolan says that there are basically 4 types of liberty activists. There's the educators who educate libertarians or educate people about libertarian philosophy and try to convert them to become libertarians. There's infiltrators, and these are people that think the best thing a libertarian can do is try to get a seat in power and occupy one of these seats and get into the system, get into Leviathan and make changes maybe from within. There's snipers, and snipers are people who target an egregious thing that the state is doing. We see a lot of snipers right now focused on the pandemic and the lockdowns and the vaccine passports and particular things. They might have one issue that they really harp on and focus on, and they snipe that all day long. And then there are the retreaters, and these are people that kind of do what Walden did, right? Which is, or Thoreau, which is retreat into the woods and kind of live a hermit lifestyle, or maybe they're people like the modern day version of this is they 3D print their own guns, or they grow their own crops, they become agorists, or like one of our speakers later today, they just start their own damn libertarian city and make the government irrelevant in their life, or they use cryptocurrency or something like that. So those are the four different ways we can attack the state that David Nolan has put out. And I think that we have to choose what we're going to do as a political party. Are we going to be infiltrators? This is what most political parties are trying to do. They're trying to infiltrate government. They're trying to become government. They're trying to win seats and get those seats at power, and then hopefully make some change that way. Well, I think that in order to do that, you have to throw out the education component, right? You have to reflect culture if you want to win Parliament. In fact, the best thing you could do if you want to occupy a seat, and I know there are some people that are doing this right now, there are some libertarians, hardcore libertarians, I believe, in the Conservative Party of Canada right now. They're in the closet, they can't let their libertarian color show, they're infiltrators, they're in there, they believe taxation is theft. In fact, one MP in Edmonton here got in trouble because he wore a taxation is theft t-shirt on a plane, and he had to do some backpedaling. He's like, oh, I just wore it for jokes and as a conversation point. You and I know that guy's in the closet. He really believes taxation is theft. He's in there. He's an infiltrator. But what can you do as an infiltrator? What has he done in Parliament? Has he shifted any policies within the parties? Has he even got the Conservatives to put liberty on their talking points as something to talk about in their platform? No, he's handcuffed. He is basically chained down by the political culture, by institutional inertia, by bureaucracy, by the fact that he wants to get elected again, and in order to get elected, he can't say anything outside the allowable opinion, right? And so it's no wonder that the biggest threat to liberty right now isn't the extremists on the left and right, it's the centrists. It's all the people that are running this place that are right there smack dab in the center of the Overton window. This is why O'Toole's policies don't look appreciably different than Justin Trudeau. Well, think about this. If you're in O'Toole's position, you're running the Conservative Party of Canada, the biggest party next to the Liberals, the one that has a chance to unseat Trudeau, What policy do you run on? Do you run on the Libertarian policy? Is that going to get you elected? No, you can't. That'll definitely not get you elected. If you want to lose an election, that's what you run on. You can't run on what the PPC is running on. I mean, they're far too right-wing for Canadians on average to vote for. There's certainly a hardcore supporter base there. So if you're O'Toole, you have to do essentially what O'Toole's doing now. He's making a lot of clumsy gaffes. I mean, I don't know if you saw this ad they put out today, which is just super cringeworthy. You know, but if you're O'Toole, you gotta have a climate action policy. You gotta have a pandemic policy. You know, when the pandemic started, in fact, O'Toole recognized this and said it's time to put Canada on a war footing. So he wanted to, you know, use the Emergency Measures Act, or the old War Measures Act, to you know, consolidate state power and deal with this pandemic. So he's no different than Trudeau, and he has to say that. He has to have a message that will appeal to the center, to appeal to the average Canadian. And being a conservative, you know, a principled conservative or a libertarian, that scares the hell out of the average Canadian. So you can't win an election on that. So O'Toole is doing exactly what O'Toole needs to do to win elections. And if you are a political party interested in gaining power, you know, you eventually have to go to the center. Now, look at a party like the PPC, which is picking up all sorts of momentum and support because populism is growing, okay? He's appealing to the biggest population of disenfranchised people there are out there. People that understand there's something going wrong, that maybe think that there's something wrong with immigration, there's something wrong with globalism, and they can't quite put their finger on it. And so Maxime has to speak to those people, get them all under his wing, and hopefully gain some momentum. And we see this over and over again in conservative politics, and this is why Michael Malice has quipped that conservatives are essentially just progressives driving the speed limit. Now, if Maxime's party grows and takes a considerable vote count from the CPC, like the Reform did to the, what was the party, the other conservative party at the time? What's the progressive conservative, the PCs, right? So you had the progressive conservatives that were really center party, then you had Reform, which was more just outside maybe the Overton window a little bit, but right on the edge. They were growing in popularity, they were really getting support from the conservative base, and then they were in a position to actually unseat the left and form government. And they recognized that we can't split the vote. In order, if we're going to do what we need to do, which is infiltrate government and get those seats in power, we're going to have to run a centrist campaign. They formed up with the CPC, and you know, we had again a very centrist campaign. I mean, Corrine became a libertarian because Harper banned incandescent light bulbs. What kind of conservative does that? You know, of all the things, it's great. So I will argue that you have to choose. You can either be an educator or you can be an infiltrator, and the two are almost mutually exclusive. Both of those strategies might be valid, but you can't do both. If you try to do both, you'll do both and fail miserably. You know, there's no point in putting up libertarian numbers if you don't even have a libertarian message. The one exception to this, I will say, is Ron Paul. Ron Paul was an infiltrator. He had a seat in power, and he was a hardcore libertarian who spoke truth to power in the halls of Congress. Now, Ron Paul wasn't elected by the American electorate. I mean, he didn't win the presidential race, and he didn't, you know, he got elected basically, I think, not because his constituency were hardcore libertarians, the district that he ran in, but because he was a country doc that delivered most of those people, and everyone loved him. They loved, you know, his ideas were tolerable to them, and they loved the guy, so they elected him. And then when he got into Congress, he used that as a platform. That's a rare situation, and that can't actually happen in Canada, because Ron Paul in Canada, imagine a country doc here who's very libertarian leaning, running for the Conservative Party in Canada, gets elected as an MP. Is he going to be able to stand up in Parliament and say the things that Ron Paul said? Is he going to be able to challenge his own party and their warmongering and their statism and all the things that Ron Paul did and called out the Republicans on? Well, no, because we have a very different system in Canada. In order to be a member of a party, you have to have the leaders consent, essentially. You have to get my signature. You have to get my consent if you want to be run. And I don't like that fact, but that's just the reality. And if I don't feel comfortable signing my name to you, or if I think you're undermining what we're trying to do, why would I sign my name and endorse you? And so we see this over and over in Canada. We see people question the party line. We saw this with Brent Rathgeber, who was a Conservative MP in St. Albert. He challenged, he tried to introduce just a modest transparency bill to see what parliamentary staffers were making to allow media to do a FOIP request for their salaries, and he basically got kicked out of caucus because it went against the party line. Now imagine if Brent Rathgeber had stood up in Parliament and said, no, we're not going to bomb Libya. We're not going to engage in this. No, we shouldn't be doing this. Well, he would have been out on his ear very quickly and without a party, and then therefore without a seat, because you can't get elected in Canada without being a member of a political party, essentially, right? So we have to decide, what is our goal? Is it to infiltrate? Is it to win seats? Is it to reflect culture? Is it to amplify culture? Or is it to shift culture? Is it to change hearts and minds? I say it's that of an educator, and you need to be clear about what you're focused on, because if you're one or the other, you're going to fail at both if you try to do both. Okay, so be very clear, and so my hope is whoever takes over leadership of the party, and my advice is to focus on one. I hope it's education, because I think that's the only thing that will get us liberty. Government, at least a libertarian government, is downstream from culture. The only thing you can do in government is maybe shrink it a little bit around the edges, but of course that'll get you kicked out, and the next guy will probably grow it twice as much as you shrunk it. So it seems like a fool's errand to me. It's not just a constitution that we need that restrains government. Constitution is only as good as the people that are in that thing. The U.S. Constitution is one of the best constitutions the world has created, and it's now one of the biggest governments in the world, most imperialistic. And so the Constitution didn't do a lot to protect the liberties of Americans. It did some, but on top of the Constitution, you need a culture of people that demand liberty or death. Join or die, baby. That's the... Okay, so... Oh, thank you. All right, so now that I've hopefully convinced you that education is our key, the next lesson I learned is there's no point in not being radical. All right? In 2015, I ran a fairly milquetoast platform, I would say. It was reasonable, and the radical in me justified it as saying, well, I'm just portraying to the people what we could reasonably accomplish in 4 years. And that's what I'm doing here with this platform. 15% flat tax, all these, there were steps in the right direction, but they didn't communicate the message, the beauty of our message. And, it was essentially not much different than what the PPC's platform is today, but it was actually attached to principles. Well, I think that was a mistake. I don't think if any of you look back at how you were convinced of the arguments of liberty, it wasn't saying that, we need a 15% flat tax. It wasn't, we need to increase the speed limit a little bit. It wasn't any of these things that, kind of milquetoast liberty parties put out. It was radicals. It was guys like Rand Paul who said, no, we're bringing all the troops home. We're not just decreasing our activity, around the world. We're shutting down all our foreign military bases. We're pulling all the troops home. We're shutting them down, and we're no longer going to victimize the taxpayer and put our citizens at risk and put our soldiers at risk by engaging in all these things. That was radical. He stood up he was in I think, Georgia or something like that. It was a very southern state, very socially conservative. He stood on that stage and said, yeah, I want to legalize all the drugs. By a show of hands, how many people here are going to do heroin if it's legal tomorrow? And people laughed and clapped, and they're like, yeah, he's got a good point. And that's what's appealing to people. It's not like, yeah, we need to tax and regulate cannabis. That's not going to convince anyone of liberty, right? All right, the next advice I would say is engage in leadership through attraction. We as libertarians have this habit of arguing points of like, you're wrong and here's why. And it's in part, kind of a personality defect. Jonathan Haidt has done personality research on libertarians. Turns out we're very reactive. We're very, what he describes as hyper-masculine thinkers, okay? Very logical, rational, unemotional. We were all convinced that taxation is theft because someone explained to us that it's taking without consent. And no one signed off on that. And you go through the logic and you're like, oh, that actually makes sense. And we didn't listen to the emotions in us saying, well, how is society going to survive? What about the roads? What about, but most people, they let their emotional reactions override their logic. And so we have to be cognizant of that and understand that Teddy Roosevelt was right. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You need to listen to people, connect with them, understand their concerns, and then tell them stories about how liberty can actually address their concerns, how liberty can make their life more beautiful and more meaningful, and attract people that way. And when you're leading a group of libertarians, I mean, we are literally cats, okay? We are independent, we don't do well in groups, we don't get along, we're very reactive personalities. It's one of our biggest strengths, but it's also one of our biggest weaknesses when it comes to organizing. But I contend we can get over that. Okay, we can work together. And I often use one of my favorite quotes. Morton Blackwell, who runs the Leadership Institute in the States. We've done some training down there, and they have awesome training. They're very libertarian friendly, but they got Fox News on every channel, so you kind of have to hold your nose a little bit and kind of. But good people, good training, and he has a bunch of rules for political action or politics. And the one I like the most is rule number 23, which is in volunteer politics, a builder can build faster than a destroyer can destroy. And I found this to be true. And so you can focus on the destroyer. You can put all your time and effort into the critics, into the people that are lobbing shots, into the people that are trying to backstab you as leader and betray you and do all this thing. You can spend all your time and energy doing that, trying to whack those moles down, or you can just focus on what's working, on building relationships, on garnering trust. Because at the end of the day, the people that are the armchair critics, they aren't doing anything, they aren't building anything. No one's attracted to that anyways. Those people aren't, they're not getting any air. They're not building a movement or anything like that. But if you are a relationship builder, if you are out there trying to address concerns people have and trying to work together and trying to ensure you're all on the same page and understand why someone might be drifting off the task and they need to be motivated, if you're working on building those relationships, people trust you, they like you, they think you view as authentic. None of the stuff the critics say even matters because they know who you are as a person and you're building relationships and you're building trust. So in volunteer politics, a builder can build faster than a destroyer can destroy. And ultimately, if you're herding cats, and that's kind of what your role as leader is going to be, if you're taking a leadership role in the party, very difficult to organize them because if we don't see the point in something, we take our ball and go home. You can't herd cats with sticks. If you try to herd cats with sticks and say, listen, you got to do this because I said so or whatever, they're going to scatter and they're going to be even more disorganized. What you do is what I learned on the farm. You milk a cow, put down a warm saucer of milk, and the cats come running and they organize themselves around that. So it's about attraction. It's about connecting with what's alive in them and being a servant to that. And that's it. I mean, people ultimately, unfortunately, they follow, except for hardcore libertarians like you and I probably, most people follow leaders, not ideas. And so you need to exemplify leadership. You need to be a person of good character who cares about people, who addresses their concerns, who connects with them heart to heart. All right, and the final thing I learned, and if I had a title for this talk that I'm going to give, or a title for a book I'm going to write in the future, it would be The Audacity of Hopelessness. Because things are hopeless. Things aren't going to work out. Things are going to get real funky before they ever get better. And it's tough because you put in a lot of work, as Malcolm said, I made a lot of, I wouldn't say sacrifices because I don't want to trigger the objectivists here, but I made a lot of trade-offs that were, questionable to outside observers, like my wife, for example. Like, why did you just blow your retirement savings on this? Are Canadians even worth it? I'm like, oh, that's a good point. I don't know. But and then, of course, you do all this work and you get 1% of the vote. And you do all this work and you lose half your volunteer force. And you do all this work and half the party gets pissed off about something you did and leaves you dangling. And you do all this work. And so it is a humiliating, humbling, painful process what we're engaged in. And here's the essay I go back to all the time to keep myself motivated, and I give this to you. And it's an essay by Albert J. Nock this is an excerpt from it. He wrote this back in the 30s, and when a friend of his came to him, and his friend was one of the most, according to Nock, one of 4 of the best minds in Europe. And he had developed a geopolitical philosophy that he thought was going to change the world. And he said, Albert, I just need to get this out to the masses. I need to explain to people, if they hear this and they get it, they're going to get on board. But I just don't know how I'm going to do this. It seems like an overwhelming task. And how am I going to do that? And will they even listen? People don't seem to be getting it. And that perfectly describes what we're doing here. Well, Nock tells him a story about the prophet Isaiah. And it goes like this. In the year of Uzziah's death, the Lord commissioned the prophet to go out and warn the people of the wrath to come. Tell them what a worthless lot they are, he said. Tell them what's wrong and why and what's going to happen unless they have a change of heart and straighten up. Don't mince matters. Make it clear that they are positively down to their last chance. Give it to them good and strong and keep on giving it to them. I suppose I ought to tell you, he said, that it won't do any good. The official class and their intelligentsia will turn up their noses at you, and the masses will not even listen. They will all keep on in their own ways until they carry everything down to destruction, and you'll probably be lucky if you get out with your life. Isaiah had been very willing to take on the job. In fact, he'd asked for it, but the prospect put a new face on the situation. It raised the obvious question, why, if all that were so, if the enterprise were to be a failure from the start, was there any sense in starting it at all? Ah, the Lord said, you do not get the point. There's a remnant there that you know nothing about. They are obscure, unorganized, inarticulate, each one rubbing along as best he can. They need to be encouraged and braced up, because when everything has gone completely to the dogs, they're the ones who will come back and build up a new society. And meanwhile, your preaching will reassure them and keep them hanging on. Your job is to take care of the remnant. So be off now and set about it. So that's the legacy I leave to you guys. Everything is hopeless and it's all been worth it. And I now hand the baton to the next leader to give reassurance and confidence and a voice to the inarticulate and to the remnant. There are a lot of people out there, I don't know half of you. You're the remnant. You've come from wherever, and all I did was stand on a stage and tell the truth as I see it, and people come. So hold your head up. Apocalypse is terrible, but it's not the end. There's a rebuilding phase, and hard times are going to make hard men of us, hard men and women, and we're going to rebuild. And you're the remnant. So thank you very much, and thank you for taking this weight off my back, I guess, and carrying on the work that we've done. So thanks.